Welcome to our discussion on natural disasters in France, focusing on the comprehensive bilan covering 1982 to 2025. We've got a deep dive into everything from insured damages to evolving legislative measures and prevention strategies.
Absolutely. I'm really eager to unpack all these details. So, where do we begin with such a layered and data rich report?
Well, one of the first things that stands out is the editorial that the French scheme for indemnifying natural disasters has, for more than 40 years, built its strength on three principles: solidarity, responsibility, and
Hmm.
equity. It's a robust partnership between public and private sectors, and even in these times of intensifying climatic events, its framework remains adaptable.
Right, those principles are fundamental. And I noticed the report emphasizes that insured damages now average around 2 billion euros per year, with more than half of those covered through reinsurance by CCR. That's a significant figure.
Yes, indeed. It clearly reflects the growing exposure of territories and the intensification of some natural hazards. What's striking is how the report transitions from simply quantifying these damages to also suggesting strategic levers for the future, primarily prevention, adaptation of financing, and ensuring that the regime maintains its core reinsurance vocation.
Yeah. Speaking of prevention, I found it interesting that the report argues for both collective and individual prevention measures, yet admits that current efforts fall short of what's required in our changing climate. Can you expand on that?
Of course, the report underscores prevention as the first lever that can and should be activated. It's like it's like trying to install a high-tech security system in your home rather than just fixing the locks after a break-in, right? They suggest boosting
Hmm.
tools like the Fonds Barnier and creating a more effective public-private partnership. The goal is to actually lower the number of damages before they happen, instead of solely focusing on post-event indemnification.
That makes sense. But I wonder, do you really think that ramping up prevention financing can keep pace with the ever increasing frequency and intensity of disasters? Isn't there a risk that the measures might be too little, too late?
That's a fair point. The report does suggest that while prevention is crucial, we still need to adapt financing regularly. They mention revising the premium structure every 5 years to ensure resources match the actual damage levels. So, even if prevention actions aren't immediately sufficient, the financing model is set to
Yeah.
adjust as the risk evolves. It's a balancing act between immediate recovery and long-term risk reduction.
And along those lines, the report details some legislative changes, like the new proposal of law recognizing a national climate adaptation policy that will amend disaster criteria and integrate more prevention measures. Isn't that right?
Exactly. The proposal, aimed at evolving the regime, is intended to reinforce prevention and encourage a build back better approach. It allows for reconstruction that not only repairs damage but reduces future vulnerability. They even mention adjusting indemnities so that any extra amount can only be used for vulnerability reducing repairs. This helps ensure
Right.
that rebuilding doesn't simply restore the status quo, but improves resilience.
Very interesting, especially when you factor in that the regime is also experiencing a surge in premiums. The data indicates that the catastrophe natural premiums have jumped to an estimated 3.7 billion euros in 2025, a 41.7% increase from the previous year.
Absolutely, and it's largely driven by the revised premium rates, the so-called subprime. For instance, for non-auto damages, the rate went from 12% to 20%, and for auto, from 6% to 9%. There's a transition period too, since some contract renewals occur mid-year. This change is a direct response to climate intensification and helps ensure that the regime's financing remains robust.
And let's not forget the geographical story behind these numbers. The report also provides detailed cartographies showing that insured risks heavily concentrate in large urban areas and coastal zones. That really underscores how natural hazards are not spread evenly across the country.
Precisely. There are 115.6 million insured risks, valued at over 21,720 billion euros. The maps illustrate that not only are the risks higher in urban and coastal areas, but also that the professions and industry segments see different premium evolutions, with professionals initially having a higher share but then being overtaken by individual risks.
Yeah.
It's a very granular look at how risk exposure has evolved.
Shifting gears a bit, one section that caught my eye was on the reconnaissance's Cat Nat, the recognition of natural disaster states in communes. It seems that the frequency of these recognitions is on the rise. What's your take on that?
That's indeed a fascinating aspect. Since 1982, about 99% of communes have been recognized at least once, and there's a clear upward trend. In 1999, for instance, events like Lothar and Martin led to an unprecedented record of nearly 28,000 recognitions. More recent events, especially floods and droughts, have also seen a spike in recognized communes. There's also an interesting evolution in criteria, particularly for drought. Over time, the approach has refined from just considering the presence of clay that swells to integrating detailed measurements like the soil wetness index during a specific period.
It seems that climate change is not only increasing the frequency of events, but also complicating how they're measured and recognized. The evolving criteria could well lead, as the report warns, to a larger number of recognitions than the theoretical thresholds suggest.
Exactly, and that has significant financial implications. For instance, the case of Cyclone Garance at La Réunion is a prime example. Initially, only 2 communes were recognized, but later, this expanded to 12 based on additional technical data from Météo France, costing CCR an extra 190 million euros. It illustrates the delicate balance between objective criteria and political pressures.
Right. And, looking at it from the bigger picture, these reports also delve into how all these elements, escalating premiums, reforms in recognition, and improved prevention measures, feed back into preserving the regime's long-term sustainability. What about the prevention funds, like the Fonds Barnier, that also feature in the document?
Yes, the Fonds Barnier is crucial. Historically, the surplus from premium surcharges would directly finance prevention measures. Now, with a revised structure, even though the surcharges are higher, generating around 510 million euros in new revenue, the actual allocation for prevention is capped at about 300 million euros. This disparity raises concerns about how effectively these funds are being reinvested to mitigate future risks. It's sort of like having a bigger piggy bank, but not necessarily spending more on the repairs to keep the house safe in the future.
That funding gap, if unaddressed, could undermine long-term resilience, despite the regime's current robustness. It's a classic challenge of balancing immediate financial needs with future risk reduction.
Indeed. And to wrap it all up, the report doesn't just present numbers and legislative updates. It vividly recounts some of the most dramatic natural events of 2025. From the flooding in Brittany with record rainfall at Rennes to the devastating impacts of cyclones Garance and Cheeto in overseas territories, these case studies underscore both the human and financial costs of inaction.
Right. These real-world examples really put the data into perspective, reminding us that behind every statistic, there are communities struggling with the aftermath of severe weather and geological events.
Exactly. And they also highlight why the regime must remain dynamic, adapting its financing, its recognition criteria, and its mitigation policies continuously. Such adaptability is essential if the regime is to continue protecting insured individuals, local governments, and the broader social fabric of France as climate change accelerates.
In summary, this comprehensive review offers both a sobering snapshot of the current natural disaster landscape in France and a roadmap for future resilience through prevention, adaptation, and policy refinement.
Yes, it's a multifaceted challenge, but one that the regime and its stakeholders are actively addressing. There's a lot for policymakers, insurers, and communities to digest and act on before the next series of events.
Absolutely. And while some points might be debated, the overall message is clear. Adaptation and prevention are not optional. They're imperative for a sustainable future.
Well put. Thanks for this engaging conversation. It's been really enlightening to break down these intricate details together.
Definitely. I appreciate the deep dive into such a complex but vital subject. Until next time, Let's keep our eyes on both the data and the dynamic challenges nature throws at us.